This is the only thing I remember from the whole event.
Were you drunk?
No, I was driving, so I had like 2 to 3 beers to start every day.
To start every day. That's yeah.
You got like 5, 6, 7 hours of content.
I was gonna say, if that's the only thing that you remember, you must have not been drunk at that point. But it sounds like you were inebriated. Oh, there were some inebriated people. I noticed a couple.
I have a few though, and my retention just goes.
Yeah.
Welcome to the Grounded Presence Podcast, a place for exploring authentic identity, deep community, and the process of spiritual change. I'm Daniel Powell, and I am back. On this episode and the next, I'll be talking to Elizabeth Colunga, and our paths have crossed at some of the events with the most interesting names. So we just had to have some conversations and tell you about these events. The first one that we'll be talking about, get this, the name of the event is Theology Beer Camp. This is an event that we attended. It was in the summer of 2017. It was a fantastic time, and I just wanted to share this experience with you. And in case you don't know what a Theology Beer Camp is, you're in luck, because we're going to talk about it, and we're going to tell you exactly what happened and just how great of a time it was. So sit back, enjoy the episode, and just as a little note, the audio quality isn't as great as I prefer it to be. It's a little echoey. It sounds like it's recorded in a cave, and you might hear a plane in the background and a motorcycle going by. But even in spite of that, I think it's a great conversation, and it's a lot of fun, and I hope you enjoy it. So without any further ado, here we go. Elizabeth Colunga and I talking about Theology Beer Camp. All right, so I'm here with Elizabeth Colunga. Is that how you say your last name?
That is exactly how you say it.
I've seen it many times, but I've never known how to say it.
So. Technically, it's Spanish, so it's Colunga.
Okay. Colunga.
Yeah.
That's a lot of fun.
That's
awesome.
Very fun.
Colunga.
It actually sounds very tribal, like Colunga.
It does, huh?
Yeah.
Bum, 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 bum,
Yep.
bum, bum, bum.
Yep.
Me and Elizabeth met because we both follow the work of Peter Rollins, and he's what is he? He's a modern philosopher, theologian.
He is. I describe him as the modern Irish philosopher and theologian. Yes.
And I would say he's like 85% philosophy, maybe like 15% theologian.
Ooh.
Does that
actually sounds pretty right?
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, it's very philosophically heavy.
Very.
But we both love it. So we just found ourselves at a number of the same events over the course of the past couple years. And these are just some of the events with the most interesting titles ever. So we just had to make a podcast about this and just tell you some of this craziness.
Yeah.
The first one that we met at was called Theology Beer Camp. Theology Beer Camp.
It doesn't get that much better.
Right? And a big shout out to Denver Brew Theology and Ryan Miller for bringing that event to Denver, because that was just fantastic. And the whole Brew Theology crew, I haven't had very many interactions with them, but when I have, it's fantastic conversation.
They're all really great people, and Tripp Fuller as well.
So let's just talk about what we each got out of that event.
I think you mean what we brought to it.
I brought myself, and I brought an empty glass.
Yeah. Yeah.
So a little description of this event, like maybe you don't know what a Theology Beer Camp is. And that's understandable because I didn't before I went either. But basically what this event looked like is it was in a church. Mm-hmm. There were also 16 kegs of beer.
Yeah.
And about 100 people.
In a span of a couple days.
2-3 days.
Yeah.
So 16 kegs, 100.
Right.
Do the math. There was beer left over.
There was beer left over. There were some. I think you could say you got a hangover over it.
There were.
I bet you.
There were growler fills on the way out the door.
Yeah.
But it was a really good time, and I had never encountered Tripp Fuller's work before that event. Had you?
Same. No.
Okay, and he's the guy who really puts this on, even though Peter Rollins was at that event, and that's the reason we went. Tripp Fuller put this on, and he's really theologically heavy.
He is.
Which isn't really my boat. I like the philosophy a lot more than the theology.
Yeah.
But he approached it like with a really beautiful perception, and he said some stuff that really resonated with me.
Absolutely.
And even though it was like really intellectually heavy and above my pay grade, quite honestly.
Right.
It was just apparent that he connected those things in a more integrated way than a lot of people do.
Well, and especially since the two, both Tripp and Pete, were such humble and just great guys outside of, their talks.
Mm-hmm.
And they were very approachable, very humble, that even Tripp is just, he's a handful.
So the thing that Tripp Fuller said that spoke to me the most, and this is saying something because I had some preconceptions of him, right? Mm-hmm. So I think he used to be a youth pastor, right?
I think so, yeah.
And you know how some youth pastors just have that I'm gonna call it frat boy energy.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yep.
Just like, whoo, party! He's definitely got that, and there was karaoke on the first night, so yeah.
That was mandatory. That was required for beer camp. So.
But so I love experiences like this when I have a preconceived notion of somebody, and then that just gets scrapped. When I allow myself to connect with them, it's like they say something that's integrated enough.
Yeah.
And it's not like they're holding it tightly.
Right.
It's like loosely. It's an invitation, right? And here's what he said that was utterly beautiful.
Okay.
That invited me in to listen to him. So in regard to theology, he said, it's not about asking the right questions. It's about finding ever more beautiful ways of asking the questions.
Yeah. Absolutely. That's so interesting coming from him, just because I see him outside of, the really kind of deep stuff. I don't really know where I want to go with that.
Reading this quote, it might not be the best wording of like the energy that he brought to it, because it's like, it's not about getting answers to the questions. And I wrote this from memory, so that might not even be the way he put it.
Right.
But it's not about getting answers to the questions. It's about finding ever more beautiful ways of asking the questions.
Right.
That's probably more accurate to what he said.
Right.
What that does to me, though, is it just brings that energy of living in the tension between two, like, black and white dualities.
Yes.
And finding that middle road, or like to use Christian terminology, that narrow road, right? The less traveled.
Yeah, because I feel like as humans, we like right and wrong.
Oh, yeah.
We want to, our ego loves it. And we want to know what's right and wrong and black and white in a gray world. And it's really uncomfortable to have the unknown or still have questions unanswered. But if you answer the questions, doesn't that kind of suck the life out of it anyway?
Yeah, you don't get to ask any more.
No.
If you answer all the questions, what do you do?
Yeah.
Work your 9 to 5 and then die?
Yeah. Okay, check that off the list. Yeah.
It's just human to ask questions and seek those answers. And once you stop doing that, you cease to become human.
Exactly.
I have one more thing that I wanted to talk about from the Theology Beer Camp. Did you have anything else?
Oh, about Theology Beer Camp?
Yeah.
Oh, man.
Any takeaways or just anything about the experience?
For sure. I mean, sometimes I get lost in Pete's accent. Like, my mind just goes elsewhere. Same when I watch like Game of Thrones. I'm like, wait, what did they say? 5 minutes later. But when Pete makes a point, like, oh man, it drives home. He was talking about in psychoanalysis the id and the ego and the superego, and that voice that tells you you're not good enough unless you do so and so this, or unless you have these people as friends, unless you have this job, unless you have better sex, or whatever it is. And that's rang true to my upbringing for so long that I had to like prove my worth because I was listening to that voice. But you know what really hit home for me was he was saying in psychoanalysis, that's called the ego and the superego. In theology, yep.
Clear that up. So what's the ego and what's the superego?
So your ego is your work, your competition. Your superego says you need to work harder. You're not good enough.
It's like the thing that's pulling the strings on your ego.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Ooh.
But he says in theology, it's called the serpent, where the serpent says...
I'm going to need a day to think about that one, like, to actually integrate that, because I feel like you just dropped a bomb. Did he say that?
He did.
Okay.
He said... Yeah,
must have been lost in his accent.
It was probably the accent, yeah. That the serpent is the one that says, hey, if you just do this, and that we have to continue to try to prove ourselves. And I know I've been caught up in listening to that voice. So it's almost realizing, like, whose voice got into our heads? And who's actually defining us? Is it this voice that maybe somewhere along the way, I know in my life it's been, various family members, it's been whatever, teachers and people who say we can't, or we're not good enough, or we're not skinny enough, or we're not pretty enough, or we're stupid, or whatever. And him really saying that was a serpent. It's like, oh, that's not the voice we're supposed to be listening to in the first place.
That's gold. That is gold.
Yeah.
Man. Yeah.
Well, it's also interesting because he's said to exorcise that voice, which...
But you can't exorcise it if it's projected.
You can't.
Onto a being, because that being is in existence.
Right.
And as long as that being is in existence, it can't be defeated.
Right. Yeah.
Which is what's so compelling about the overarching, like, big picture Christian story, right?
Yes.
In the end, God defeats the devil.
Yeah. Which I think in the Jewish mind, the devil is our ego. Right. And even, yep.
If we can defeat that today, like, I don't want to wait. That's my thing. Like, I don't want to wait to defeat that until, like, 10,000 years or whatever.
Right.
Whenever the Christian narrative says
right. Yeah.
the end of the world's supposed to happen.
Have they put a date on that yet? I'm sure
they're always putting dates on it.
They're always putting dates.
Probably Google one that's I'm sure it's supposed to be today.
Yeah, the next full moon or the whatever. But in regards to, like, listening to that voice too, like, if you do listen to it, it's just going to keep demanding. It's just going to tell you to do more and more and more, and you're not going to find your worth in that. Your worth is you, and you don't let it define you. And listen to it. You can listen to it. You don't have to accept it. Like, you can accept it, but you don't have to feed into it. That's I think the gold nugget that stuck out for me was for Pete.
That was a great gesture you just had.
What
was that? You, like, kind of looked like, oh my gosh, like, just pushed it all away.
Yep.
Just above your head, like, no.
That's it.
Yeah, so good. Mm-hmm. So good. Mm-hmm. Oh, there's one last thing that stuck out to me, and that was also something that Peter Rollins said. This is the only thing I remember from the whole event.
Were you drunk?
No, I was driving, so I had like 2 to 3 beers to start every day.
Oh, to start every day. That's so.
I mean,
Yeah.
You got like 5, 6, 7 hours of
I
content.
was gonna say, if that's the only thing that you remember, you must have not been drunk at that point. But it sounds like you weren't. Oh, there were some inebriated people. I noticed a couple.
I have a few though, and my retention just goes.
Yeah.
Yeah, Peter Rollins. Okay, he brought up this idea of these 3 archetypes, and this was just gold. The 3 archetypes are the patriot, the anarchist, and the rebel.
Okay.
And he gave a brief description of those. You know, I heard those at first. I'm like, what?
Yeah.
Where's this going?
Yeah.
But the patriot fully accepts and defends institutions and the status quo.
Yes.
Right? That totally rings true with patriotism.
Yes.
You know, USA all the way, without seeing like the duality, you know, the good and the bad.
Yep.
Right? We're all good. Let's propel ourselves like to be the leaders of the world.
Yeah.
You know? And then there's the anarchist. And the anarchist is always raging against any form of institution, right? Mm-hmm. So it's like, it's not, we need to retool. It's like, tear everything down. It's all shit. Tear it down, tear it down, tear it down, right? It's like, we just need to be left to ourselves.
Yeah.
And then the third archetype is the rebel. This is the one I really like. Mm-hmm. The rebel fights with a purpose to improve the institution and the status quo.
Yep.
Yeah?
Exactly.
But
right.
I think nearly everybody is an anarchist masquerading as a rebel. Because patriots, there's really not many true patriots. Because everybody sees the shit show that is like the American government right now, right?
Yeah.
And just all the dishonesty and corruption that can be seen, you know, with like a little bit of digging. And maybe it's not even the dishonesty and corruption, but it's just nobody's moving towards a common goal.
Right.
You know, that's very disorienting. So to be a patriot of a structure where there's not really a common goal.
Right.
You got to be an anarchist to some extent.
Right.
Like, let's tear that down.
I think it's numbed or it's silenced, or if you really are a quote patriot, that maybe they feel like they've already achieved their goal and that any threat to changing the system is a threat to their patriotism and that voice that might actually be suppressed. Because I think we mentioned this, like, we're always evolving, we're humans, we need to change and adapt, and the only permanent thing on the planet is change. So, and inevitably everything changes. So I feel like there are patriots, but they're comfortable. It's like the ones that are just kind of maybe fallen asleep to everyone else. And maybe themselves.
I think a true patriot is going to be somebody that's just like full bore, 100%. I believe in this cause.
Yeah.
Right?
Would you say there's ignorance there?
It depends on what you would call ignorance, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because if ignorance is just like not being aware, then definitely, right? And that's why the act of patriot is so hard in today's society, because you can see everything, right? It was like, you know, they talk about Vietnam. It became easy to report war from the field with video.
Yeah.
And all these traumatic images were being brought back and projected onto TV, right? And it's easy to support a war when you feel like the good guy, right?
Yes.
But when you start seeing those images of like just grisly war and like broken bodies, that's the human psyche can't reconcile that.
No.
You know?
That's when the questions arise.
Right.
But you know what's also fascinating is that history books, education, the quote winners are the patriots, are the Euro white male. And it's like, oh, what about the suppressed slaves? What about the Native Americans? What about these people that were oppressed? And so I think we're just becoming aware of that.
Yeah, and it takes a lot of personal work to like hold that tension, right? Because we can't solve that tension, and that's all we know how to do. You know, we don't know how to sit with tension.
And yeah, and also like, especially if it's something like the history books that we've been fed this narrative for so long, and we realize that we've been wrong. Maybe not wrong all along, but it's like, oh, but there's another side to it, and and seeing that for the first time ever,
traumatic.
That's hard. Yeah, it takes a lot of work.
Yeah.
But then
when that happens in my life, like I've always wanted to sweep that under the rug.
Absolutely,
like,
it's easy.
No, too soon.
It is way too
Don't
easy.
want to look at that.
But also, well, that's also interesting because we can't force it on anyone either.
Right.
Oh my god. Yeah,
I don't know. I'm not sure exactly where we're going with this.
Yeah.
But a good conversation.
A great conversation.
Yeah, it's a lot of interesting stuff.
So
I guess back to the patriot.
Yeah. Oh,
I don't.
patriot.
There's not any true patriots out there.
Right.
Depends on how you would term patriot, I suppose.
Yeah.
But nobody has 100% faith in the American government system.
I mean,
Fair?
I think there are those that have the MAGA hats or whatever that feel like they do.
I would say even they, though, like they think they do. But here we go. They have 100% faith in their government system.
Yeah.
So
You mean their individual government system, or how they idealize it?
yeah, exactly. Right. So it's not, ooh, here we go. The new patriot isn't the person who has 100% faith in the system that's above them. Mm-hmm. It's the patriot that has 100% faith in the system that they project.
Yes, exactly. And that's what I find in
An individualized patriotism.
Yeah. Yep.
That's an interesting
Yep.
thought.
Well, it's so interesting because, like, once we hold that posture of, like, no, this is exactly how it is, then you have no room for growth. And that's exactly where growth happens. But they're not ready for it. It's okay.
Right, like being tested and, like, allowing those things to seep in.
Yep. But it's interesting because even the rebel and the anarchist are all kind of shaped by the patriot.
So one more thing about this patriot, anarchist, and the rebel is I just really see these as developmental stages, right? Patriotism, the patriot. Mm-hmm. That's like infancy, right? Mm-hmm. You grow up in a home and like, daddy can't do wrong, right? Best thing in the world, even if he's not. And then when that veil gets ripped from your eyes, you become the anarchist, right? The adolescent. You rebel against everything. Nobody can tell me what to do. I'm my own person. That's awesome. Yep. That's a great stage to be at, right?
Yeah.
And then you have the rebel. That's maturity and wisdom, right? Mm-hmm. It's seeing things like you don't need to change everything. Mm-hmm. Like a lot of stuff's okay the way it is, but seeing things that are like, no, that needs to change. And then devoting yourself and your resources and your energy to changing that. You know, that's maturity right there.
Yeah, that's hard. That's definitely development. I think also what you're describing is spiral dynamics.
Yes.
But even before the patriot, even after the rebel, there are other stages of thought development, which is why I love spiral dynamics so much, but that's a good chunk of it.
It's good stuff.
Yeah.
Hey, and you know what? Spiral dynamics, something that's always been happening. Somebody finally just put it into a really clean model.
Don Beck. Yeah, he's great. What?
Okay. I'm not 100% clear on spiral dynamics.
Okay.
I thought it was Ken Wilber.
Ken Wilber took the model, and he's kind of one of the voices to it, yeah.
Gotcha. But Don Beck is like the OG.
Yeah, and there's a female, her name is Claire Graves, I believe.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm going to have to do a little more research on this, read the actual books. They're on my list.
Yeah.
But yes, spiral dynamics is fantastic.
So
and
great.
That's definitely in there.
And that should give you an idea of what exactly goes on at a Theology Beer Camp. Lots of beer, lots of theology, good people, great conversations. And there are these tacos. These really good tacos that we had for lunch. I can't believe we didn't talk about the tacos. What were we thinking? What a missed opportunity. Well, in a couple weeks, I'll be talking to Elizabeth Colunga about another event that we've been involved in together. And make sure to join me for that. It's an event that's even more interesting than Theology Beer Camp. So I'll see you in a couple weeks, and until then, stay grounded.